Thank you, and welcome to everyone else out there. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever. Let me get straight to it because I talk a lot. Sometimes I get carried away, and I know Rob is going to put that smiley up. So just in case, beginning with slide number 1, this is a little bit about my roadmap. When I came to Italy, I wasn't in the language industry. I had no idea about teaching. I was in the fashion industry, or the rag trade, as it's well known. And when I got here, I started meeting people who kept saying to me, oh, you should get into the EFL industry. And I was like, what is EFL? So I had to understand what people were talking about. And why they were telling me to get involved in it was because once I decided to live in Italy, and the area that I lived in wasn't really, although all of Italy is fashion conscious, but this area wasn't well known for its fashion industry. It was a little bit further out. So I was up in the mountains, and my husband lived up here, and his job was here. That we were going to live in this area, so I had to find something to do. So I got introduced to EFL, and I had to do lots of training. I didn't go back to school officially or official schools because at the time that wasn't required and didn't seem something that I needed. So I did something like a few years of learning and training about and teaching and work experience in teaching. Then I started working with private language schools, and then I started my own business as well, my own language school, which has been going on in the background all the time. Then I was introduced to going live, and that was really Sylvia Guinan, who's a wonderful ELT professional in her own right, and someone that I've always loved reading and listening to her. And she, through LinkedIn, invited me to attend one of Jason R. Levine's programs on ELT, so going live, teaching online. So I did that, and then I was introduced to WizIQ and online teaching and learning, and that was a whole new experience. And another thing too that I learned from Jason and from Sylvia Guinan at the beginning, that was before meeting everybody else, virtually, of course, was that sharing your materials and sharing with other people. And up until that moment, I didn't even know what sharing really meant. And there was a lot of negativity in Italy about sharing anything with other teachers. So everyone was really, jealous of what they did, and they were afraid of like someone copying them or taking their ideas. So I learned I'm totally open to sharing now. I share everything. So then I've gone to teaching online, sharing and learning, and ongoing professional development that is never ending. And I'm nearly 60, and I'm happily continuously learning and continuing learning. I just love learning all the time and learning from these wonderful people around me. To mention a few, Shelley, who's opened up our day today, Judy Wong, Cheryl McCoy, who's been working with me recently, and we've done some amazing work together, and she's an amazing lady too. Dr. Nellie has been my mentor along all of my road after Jason R. Levine's course. I'm talking with my hands. That's horrible, isn't it? As an Australian, I shouldn't be talking with my hands, but I've lived in Italy for 20 odd years now, so I talk with my hands as well. Isn't that funny? So the groundwork was made in private language schools, where I did a lot of shadow teaching in the beginning, and then I did teacher training, and then I learned how to prepare my own materials. At the time, the private language school I was working with was one of the only schools in the area that had a great internet connection, and I was learning how to use internet, and this is going back to the late 90s. Then I started being sent out to elementary and middle schools, and that's when I learned how the other half work, not just the private language schools, but the bureaucratic schools, or the ministerial public schools. Then I went into tech high schools, and I was at one of the local tech high schools for about 10 years, and I really, really enjoyed that experience. It was amazing. Everything is amazing to me. Every experience that I go through is amazing because I always learn so much from everything, even if it's negative and I fall down and pick myself up, just keep going. It's always important. Then I got involved in business English, and that was in the local industries, something that came naturally because of my business background. Then I got into interpreting and translating manuals, and that's when I learned how important it is to read a manual when you buy a household product, something that I do automatically now, having written so many or translated so many. And going on, learning and teaching objectives. My learning and teaching objectives all the way along, and every time it's always looking at the pedagogy behind what I'm going to be teaching. There's a lot of reading and study done. Every single time I prepare a new course, I always go back and have a look and make sure that I'm on the right guidelines, and I want to always understand the learner's needs. So I use things like Google Forms, and I send them out at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of courses. And I'm always trying to find new apps to use. I love using technology. They call me the tech teacher at the high school where I work at the moment, and they love following me around, and they bring me their phones to fix it every time they can't work out what they're doing with their phones. Analysis and reflection is always, I always sit back and reflect on what I've done and look at it and write it down. Then I talk about it with people that want to listen to me. And sometimes that's been Rob, Judy, or Cheryl McCoy recently. We've spent hours and hours and hours and hours talking. Thomas Hodges also was and still is one of the people that I talk a lot with as well, that gives me a lot of advice. Teaching, I'm always looking at understanding how to use proper didactic materials that reach, that take the student in a step-by-step process, but don't overwhelm the students. I've refined my own methods of teaching in that I always try and find a simpler method for students to learn, rather than get them to always be overwhelmed by textbooks that seem to always repeat, or be bored. Sometimes, just the fact that the students say to me, it's so boring sitting in a grammar class. So I make sure that grammar class becomes fun by using Kahoot or Socrates or something like that turns it into, or board games, which has been my latest craze to use in classrooms. It's always important to understand what the learner needs and how to get them to move along by themselves, because they really learn when they are doing the learning themselves. So as a teacher, if we do too much frontal teaching where we just do the lecture and expect them to understand it and take it away and learn from it, then that's, to me, an old-fashioned method. But I can understand that that's needed at certain levels. But at high school, for example, I like to get my students to play teacher. So sometimes, especially with the older students, they love coming up and taking the lesson plan from me and then standing up and doing it, and then I'm just there on the side giving them a hand and telling them what to do next, and they love that, and they take photographs of themselves, put it up on Instagram and say things like, I was the teacher for today, and they really then, I see that they really learn from it. They really understand the topic even better, especially if we're doing something on literature, etc. And always practicing makes a better teacher. That's obvious. Any sort of practice makes you better at doing anything. So the more I teach, the more I learn, the more I become, I think, or I feel that I become better. I hope that I do. I know that my colleagues are always coming in. Okay, it's time to go. Next, quickly go down the track. I've obviously gone overboard. But anyway, this is, where I'm coming from. Where are we? Here? I can hear someone coming in, cutting me out. Okay, my experience in classrooms, and I'll just move along. That's my business. Creating a brand was important. Creating my own materials. I love creating my own materials. I always offer a video link and an audio link so that they can watch the animated video. And I do that for everyone all the time. These are some of the people that were important to me in my passage along the way, on my road trip along this journey of learning. These are some of the presentations that I've done for IATEFL and EFL. And this is, I think, my last. Collaborating and sharing, as I said at the beginning, is really, really important. And I use a lot of different sites to share. And if I haven't shared enough, please reach out. I'll share anything. And ongoing professional development. This is a beautiful saying that Cheryl found for me. Cheryl McCoy, thank you for being my buddy the last few weeks, not only in personal relationships, but also in professional life. If like-minded people work together, it is a beauty to witness. And this is so true. Thank you. And sorry for going overboard.